Welcome to PÖFF TV, the official channel for the 26th Black Nights Film Festival, here for another session of Meet the Filmmakers. I am your host, Andrei Liimets, and with me I have Michael Keerdo-Dawson, the director of the film having its world premiere here at the festival, The Limits of Consent. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
So I guess what really pops up even from the synopsis already is the fact that it's an interactive film. So what does that mean?
In this case, it means that at certain points in the film, you will, as the audience members, will have a chance to change the direction of the story. So the story, it looks, if you put it diagrammatically, it looks like a tree, and it splits off into different directions and eventually reaches 9 different endings.
So almost like Black Mirror or Bandersnatch, which I guess is the most well-known interactive film so far.
Similar, very similar, but with some key differences. One of the big differences is in that Bandersnatch had dead ends, where the film would kind of force you to go back and pick the correct path. My film does not do that. You pick your path, it takes you to the end credits roll, that's it. And there is no kind of like wrong path, as it were. It's just 9 different ways to explore the film. And of course you can go back and explore the different endings as well, or you can just watch it to one ending and that's your ending and go home.
So on Netflix, everyone could kind of take the remote and push the buttons. How does it work in the cinema?
In the cinema, we had 2 options for it. Actually, we presented an option for this festival, which would involve kind of scanning QR codes with your phone and voting on a system that the projectionist would then see. But we were then discouraged from doing that. They instead encouraged us to put it into small screens and to have kind of a physical vote, where the film will stop and someone will basically, do you want this option? And everyone will put their hands up and then we'll count which way. It's the democratic rule for where the story should go next. Of course, when it's on a smart TV, I think the system is much more intuitive, but it's not necessarily better or worse. What's very interesting for me for the next 3 screenings, I'm attending all 3 screenings here because I want to see what happens in the democratic environment to the choices that people make. I'd be very interested to see if each audience makes the same decisions, if the group flattens the decision somehow, because I think individuals will pick differently, but the group, maybe it flattens it. I'm curious to see if I'm right about that. I also hope that I'm wrong about it, because then it means I've kind of done my job wrong, because we tried to balance the decisions so that there wasn't like an obvious one that you would pick. So, for example, if there's the choices go home or stay at home or go to the party, everyone's going to pick go to the party because okay, something might happen at the party and nothing's going to happen. So we didn't try to do that. We tried to give kind of choices that were balanced, where you each one has some kind of intrigue, and you can kind of go with your gut, as it were. So I'm very interested in how it plays out in this kind of cinema audience.
So the film is also a sociological study about the audience and their choices.
It could be a very interesting study for a social scientist to look at. I'm not a social scientist. I'm more of a humanitarian, so I'm more interested in like how the feeling of the screening. But yeah, it would also be very interesting to see to track it across cultures as well, to see whether or not, for example, an Estonian audience does something different to it compared to a Spanish audience, or some different culture. And I think probably there would be a cultural factor in what the audience would pick.
Most people, of course, know the film I already mentioned, Black Mirror Bandersnatch, but has this kind of format been tried in a cinema before?
It has. Very limited. It's part of my research at the moment, and so I know quite a bit about it. The most famous example was a Czechoslovakian film called Kino Automat, which was made in the 60s even, and the film never took off. In that... The technology hasn't moved on very far, to be honest. In that screening, they also took a vote and people decided which way it was going to go. And then later in the 90s, some American company did a film called I'm Your Man, which by all accounts wasn't a very good film, but they'd created a cinema where you had buttons to push to decide which way to vote and make the vote as seamless as possible. But possibly because the film wasn't so good, it never took off, or it was never popularized. I say that I've never seen the film, so I don't know if it. I can't speak from personal opinion, just what I've read about it. Said that it was unfortunate that it was like not a great film. But then with Netflix, not just Bandersnatch, but they've done like a series of interactive films, mostly kids' films, it seems. But they're still experimenting with this interactive format as well.
So did you have this format in mind at first, and then you thought of a story which would kind of suit it, or did you have the story in mind at first, and then you thought, hey, this might be cool interactively?
The latter. I had as part of my PhD research, I had to make an interactive film. I already had like the germs of the story in me already, and basically developed a story. And then what happens if I make this story interactive? And of course, it's kind of like a two-way process where you're writing the story and you're writing the screenplay and the story, and then you realize that you've got interactivity, and then interactivity is kind of pushing the story into different directions and making it certain things emerged in the writing process. So, for example, very interesting thing about writing this film was, if we take Bandersnatch as an example, Bandersnatch very much highlights agency and free will, and it's talking about a guy who's designing a computer game based on a choose-your-own-adventure novel. So interactivity is very much in the foreground. In our film, it's more in the background, but it is there because the protagonist is controlling people like remotely and telling people what to do. And then at a certain point, she surrenders this control, and then the audience takes control of her. And what's very interesting is I'd had no idea that that's what I'd written. It was only later I looked at it and was like, oh, wow, okay, that's what's happening in the film, and yeah.
And the protagonist, of course, is a pickup artist who kind of directs different men, and the story tells about intimacy and sexuality in today's society. So compared to a linear movie, how different was it working with the actors, directing it, or was it similar?
Not so different, very similar. I would say the one thing, I think there was one moment or a couple of moments where actors were a bit confused because we were asking them to repeat something that they'd done in a different location for a second ending, and we had to kind of like say, okay, this is like a different version of this. And at one point, there was also a problem of the character making two choices. This is something that I struggled with as well. That that if you offer me a bacon sandwich or a pot of hummus, I will pick the pot of hummus because I haven't eaten meat since 1986. So then if you give a character a choice like that, they will always pick the pot of hummus, right? So that's who they are as a character. So how can they make both choices? And this was also a dilemma in the writing process, and it's also a dilemma for directing the actors, because actors always want to understand, what the truth of the moment is, what the motivation is, and then you say, okay, well, both. This somehow goes against what we understand as humans, that we make our choices, and the choice has been behind us, and we carry on to the next choice. But in interactivity, it's actually okay. No, both are possible. It means that we have to conceive of characters differently a little bit, and maybe we have to conceive of ourselves a little bit differently. That we represent our choices, but as much as we represent the choice to do this, we also represent the choice that we didn't take. Maybe this is getting a little bit deep, but
it sounds very interesting. But to wrap up, are you looking to explore interactivity in your next films as well, or is it a one-off?
It's not a one. What I would say, I'm interested in the next films exploring non-linearity, continuing to explore non-linearity. Whether or not that comes out from interactivity or not is an open question. The next film that we're planning at the moment, the initial stage is to think about using a randomizer, for example, so that the film will, each scene will be kind of reconfigured and put in a different place every time you watch it. So you literally can't watch the same film twice. Now that I've kind of gone beyond linear filmmaking, I don't know, it seems very strange to go back almost. I feel like I've opened Pandora's box for myself, and I have to keep going and see where it takes me.
So thank you very much, Michael, and all the best with your film.
Thank you.
And everyone can explore the Pandora's box with Michael, because The Limits of Consent, as mentioned before, has its world premiere here at the Black Nights Film Festival. So thank you all for watching, and see you again during the next sessions here at PÖFF TV at the Meet the Filmmakers sessions.